it here in Google Plus. I just set up a Hangout. Turning on the broadcast, it's broadcasting, and what this will do is when it's finished broadcasting, it's going to auto it's just in a lot of schools block this. Hoover didn't block it, but I know a lot of schools do block it if you're Google Apps for Education school. And then what I can do, because nobody wants to sit here and share my entire screen, so now that I'm pulling up my presentation, what that does, the audience and what's being recorded is my voice and the presentation. Super easy to set up and have a presentation. What I like about this too, about Google Hangouts, is even though you can use things like Screencast-O-Matic or Jing or some of those others, you can record for others. And then in YouTube Editor, you can edit and add title slides, transitions, etc., just like you would do in iMovie or something like that. So it's really an awesome tool. So we're going to hop right into this because we only have an hour, and actually now we have less than an hour, and talk about what is the flipped classroom and beyond just videos. So how many of you are familiar with flipped classroom? You've heard of it, but at least heard of it before, maybe interested in doing it in your school. I think it's a great thing to have, and if you're going one-to-one or bring your own technology or bring your own device, I think it's because is the teachers who have the most trouble with technology in their classrooms are the ones who are holding tight to that lecture method or traditional teaching method. And when you let go and you become the guide on the side, it's better in control. So we know basically the flipped classroom gets that teacher off the stage and lets the students guide the learning. A lot of people refer to flipped classroom as no, stop. No, you don't go home, listen to the lecture, then comes 50 and 51 odd number problems that you would have done for homework. That is not what it's about at all. And so hopefully today you'll have a better understanding of what it is. Now, this is John Bergman, who's one of the founders of, well, founding fathers is John Bergman and Aaron Sands, who started the modern flipped classroom movement. And I actually got to meet him and see him when I was in Hoover. But if you haven't seen this video before, this is a really good example of what a flipped classroom looks like. And let's turn on my volume here and just take a look at this flipped classroom. Mainly Aaron Sands talking in this.
I'm Aaron Sands, and high school learners who can learn for themselves and by themselves. So one of the problems.
That nuts. Don't you hate it? Good thing I got another one. Notice too when you watch this what his classroom looks like as opposed to a traditional.
This work, I deliver that direct instruction now, asynchronous. Last step, they were already whole numbers. We had before. Here we don't have a whole number. So here's a few little tricks when you need to multiply by whole numbers. If one of your numbers ends in 0.5, you're going to multiply by 2. 6. Yes, if they don't show up to learn new stuff, they show up to apply the things. So now they can have my lesson, if you will, what I would normally have stood up and lectured to them in class with some added features. They get that as homework in my class. The student for now. The guy who stands up in the class is. Now I walk around the class and I walk around and do that. I don't stand up. I'm in my teach under the kind of the traditional model. I'm Aaron Sams. I love Camtasia Studio.
And one, notice that Aaron Sams was saying in his class, so the several things I think are important. Not apply it to do it or on a worksheet, but actually apply it in principle using those higher order thinking skills. So you want to think about that, your hot skills, your higher order thinking skills. And also, this made me think about when our keynote speaker was talking about the rate my professor had rated that one professor not very well, but then he went back and he really liked that professor. And the thing is, the comments that they were saying is, I had to teach myself, or I had to learn myself. Classroom is have to be able to apply it in higher order thinking skills. And so it goes way beyond lecture at home and homework at school. I also feel that the flipped classroom they're the RTIs. You need to slow it down a little bit. They're the ones who need your one-on-one attention or small group intervention. And you just don't have that when you're doing lecture style. You don't have the time when it's only your voice is the only thing being heard. And then that's why we see this many results from flipping that you can pull out. But you see that this school percent of their school, they had were failing English and 44% were failing math, and they had 7. And after the flip, you see how the numbers decrease. 19% of their students were failing English, 13% math, and look at the dramatic drop in discipline cases. Kids are not off task in a flipped classroom. Kids are engaged. They have buy-in because they're able to learn at the pace they need to learn and get the attention that they need in a positive way. Either. And so we don't want that traditional lecture method. And so this is what a lot of teachers end up looking like. Oh, well, let's try that again. This is what a lot of traditional classrooms look like.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed
Have you ever sat in a class like this?
I have. The tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which anyone raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. The Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. And the Laffer curve. Anyone know what this is? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. VOO.
And so we kind of want to change that and a lot of classes get out of this. There we go. Q doesn't like Q today. Technology just doesn't. And so, like we are today, which this is a really bad example of how to teach flipped classroom. Normally I'll do like a 3-hour workshop on it and y'all are actively engaged, because in a flipped classroom, the kids are not in their desks, they're not quietly doing something, they're actively involved in their own learning. But more than anything, I don't even really like to use the term flipped classroom. I like to use the term rewindable learning, because what I do, and I ask the kids, don't kids are like, yes. And even teachers say, I could probably had that too, for when I go to a PD session or something, because I get really fired up about something I learned at back home, and I get to like step 3 of the thing that I was really fired up about, and then I can't remember what. And so that's one reason I like to do the Google Hangouts, is because then if you need to, you can always go back on that Google Hangout and rewind or fast forward me to that point. And I've done that with sessions I've attended before too. I've sat down and watched the YouTube video or whatever, like Keith George did a presentation on something with Google, and I was like, thing he showed, it's that one little thing that I couldn't remember. But Kevin Honeycutt was at keynote speech. Oh my gosh, it was fabulous. But he likes to call it rewindable learning, or making learning rewindable. And I really think his whole entire hour-and-a-half keynote is good. Dave. He really says it better than
doing this, and you'll start thinking different. You people raise your hand if you're flipping your classroom. Flipping your classroom. I love you guys. You know what you're also doing? Making rewindable learning. And he goes, but you know he doesn't. In front of everybody, front end, right, Kevin? But if I go home and watch you on my Android phone, I'll rewind you 3-4 times. I don't want to be stupid, but I can't do that. Archives. I'll start archiving. Start with the trip over lessons, the ones they trip over, the ones they ask you 4 or 5 times. You know what I mean? Because if you can do that, you don't have to indict them with an exhalation. We do this. We don't mean to, but we do. She comes up to your desk and you go, and never to come up here again. I'm stupid and I'm wasting your time. And you won't see me again. Not up here. You know what I mean? But if I could say, watch episode 3 of Math Snacks, put on headphones, I'll talk to you in a minute. Thank you. Get back to teaching. Your team teaching with yourself.
Right? Have you ever thought of it that way, that you could actually team teach with yourself by recording those little trip over lessons like Kevin Honeycutt says? And I really like that when he said that, because I had never thought of it that way before either, about team teaching with yourself. And I was one of those kids. One thing he pointed out too is I don't want to look stupid. And I have nightmares to this day about math classes. So my math teachers, I apologize, but I really do, because I had those teachers who, you know, I was one of those ADHD kids, and probably why I do what I do now when I like technology. I have 100 different tabs open, I'm doing all these different things. But in math class especially, because it terrified me, I didn't understand it, I felt stupid, I acted up all the time. I spent most of my school career in the hallway. If I wasn't in the hallway, I was lost and feeling like an idiot. And I made a mistake one time of asking my math teacher for help because, of course, she's up at the board and she's doing the problems, and she gets to step 2, and I'm staring across the classroom at Bobby because he's digging for gold, and I've got to see what's going to happen when, you know, that thing comes out because he's been digging for a while. And of course, I had to watch because I need to know is he going to eat it or not. And by the time I get back to the teacher, she's on step 4, and I have no idea how she got from step 2 to step 4. And I went up and I asked for help, and you know what I got?
What do you mean you don't understand? I just showed you on the board how to do it.
Well, I didn't ask for any help. And back in those days, because 23rd year teaching, you couldn't talk to your friends. You couldn't collaborate or get help from your friends in the classroom. You were just stuck. And so I never learned it. I never learned basic mathematics. So I'm hoping to go back at some time and use Khan Academy to help me teach myself math. And, you know, it's a shame that a lot of us were taught that way, you know, open up that page in the book and do all the odd problems on these pages and don't talk to anybody else. And for God's sake, don't ask your teacher for help. But we can make it so much better because what we really want to do is empower students to be masters of their own learning. Just like our keynote speaker today said, what was it? His brother knew how to go online and get directions for the Minecraft game, but he didn't know how to go online and get directions for the math class. So we have to empower our students to know that they're in charge of their own learning and they can master their own learning. And I think somewhere along the way, we've taken that knowledge away from them and we've built this self-doubt in them in schools because, and I know my friends from Limestone County can probably attest to this. You probably had kids like this as well. When we first gave the kids their math books, we had some kids, at least I did, who were so afraid to click on anything. They had so much self-doubt that you would actually literally have to come up to their computer and click on the button. So I'd tell the kids, all right, click on the blue button that says start. Well, there's only one blue button. It's this big on the page, right? It says start, but I'd still have, at least one kid going, Miss Robertson, this blue button? Yes, baby, there's only one blue button right there. And they've got the finger on the screen, this one. And I had to literally take my finger, put it on the screen and go, this button right here. Yes, click it. But where did they doubt? Where have they come to doubt themselves and their own knowledge and their own ability to think to that point? We beat it out of them somewhere. And so we've got to make sure to re-empower our students to be masters of their own learning. Now, this is really a big concept to talk about and to understand. So when I was at Auburn High School, I was on the new high school committee, and I was so excited because I thought, oh boy, I'm going to get help with planning out the high school and how it's going to look, and library could be here, and it look like this, and blah, blah, blah. And when I got in there with the architects and everybody, what we ended up talking about wasn't anything about the building itself, but the concept of what school is going to look like in just a few years, if not already. And it was very eye-opening because they started talking about every single student might have individualized learning plans, not just your special education students, that there's going to be flexible classroom space, and actually down in Montgomery, there's a new school that was just built down there. I can't remember the name of it, Park or something, Park High School. I can't remember the name of it. But there are no teacher desks in any of the classrooms because no classroom belongs to a teacher, and you can't be in that classroom during your planning period because there is a group central area, work area for teachers, kind of like what Google does, so that you have that interaction and teachers aren't inside their four walls. They are interacting with other teachers because that's where you can spark the ideas, is when you get people together and they start conversations. And does a warm body, so each and then zero classroom get attendance points when somebody who's doing the work but is online doing the work doesn't get it because they weren't there at school. So determining about attendance, teleconferencing, distance learning, and hybrid classes, maybe a mix of online and in-person classes,
And then what does it mean to even graduate and meet those graduation requirements? I had a friend who was the principal at a private school, and when her kids came in, they did the work, and when they earned to do work for an entire semester. And when they finished all the credits they needed to graduate,
from high school at that
and her audit congratulated them, and they were
with their high school, or 4 years or 6 years, whatever it took them, then they graduated when they were ready to graduate and they didn't have to sit around. And so then that takes into, are we going to use Carnegie units or competency-based education units? And Carnegie is that sitting your behind in a chair and that's the only thing that counts, or are we showing that we're actually mastering and learning things whether we're sitting in a chair and filling space or not? And there's several different states and school districts right now that are messing with this new type of education and what to do. Iowa is getting rid of grade levels because they've realized just because you're this age doesn't mean you're ready to go into this grade. You might be way beyond that. I have a friend of mine, when her daughter was 4, read Charlotte's Web to herself, didn't care for the ending, got on the computer and wrote an alternate ending. That child does not need to go at 5 years old into a kindergarten class where she's learning her numbers and her colors. She needs to be somewhere else. And so what they're doing in Iowa is getting rid of those grade levels altogether, and you move at your own pace, at your own learning ability. Right? And so then that's the thing you got to work with.
We read some poem on computer, and not only are you learning about grades in there, but you're also talking about this concept of grade. And I have 9th graders, and so, I mean, like you see, some of my 9th graders are, I mean, like that high thinking level where they're classmates. I mean, so even if they're, I mean, I don't know that your maturity level would grow with your age.
Probably not.
So, I mean, it's
So-
even math wise, some of my guys were really high in math, but I just.
Us and talk about and figure out how are we going to do this within our school district. And then Dr. John Covington, who's in one of the worst inner city, I think in Detroit school systems, said, you know, we've got to stop doing them through. And so also they got rid of grade levels and differentiation and learning. And we are. So I see Armistead, who's an Auburn High School graduate and now teaches in Van Meter, Iowa school. He uses Moodle management system, and he's had over 800 educators visit his classroom. And why is because of the way that he's flipped his classroom. He's done it a little bit differently. He started out, the first year he flipped, he went full flip. And then at the end, he got with his kids, saw what they wanted, and got some feedback from them. And the feedback was, some of the kids loved it. They liked that. School drum on band, and I don't have time in the evening to do the work at home, or I don't have internet at home, or I don't have a device. And then he had some who were like, I just don't get it that way. I really need. So the following year, he accommodated all 3 of those. He let them do that. He had his entire course on Moodle, beginning to end, all his labs and everything on there. And as the kids were ready to do it, he would unveil it for those kids to be able to see. And then he did the one where if you couldn't do the lectures and things like that outside of school, he let you take your own device into the back of the classroom, or he had devices available for you, and you could go back there, plug in your headphones, and work through at your own. And he would work with your own pace. And that's a big district too. How questions from there. We're going to work.
as well. And you unveil all your content, and then they get done in March.
Right, and he did that's for a semester long. What do we do with these kids who have already proven math? Kids sometimes cause as much of a problem in class and then that entire semester because of the kids, because they're bored stiff. This group feel stupid, so they're going to act that because they don't want people to know they're stupid. And so meeting those individual needs. We're lucky because in Alabama we have access classes, so we could go ahead and send the student on to a higher level class that maybe they wouldn't have had the opportunity to take. And that's but how can we accommodate it? How can we do that without it seeming like a punishment because you finished early? Now you have all this extra work you have to do. Then Julie D. Ramsey, have y'all ever attended any of her sessions? She's awesome, isn't she? So she wrote this book, Can We Skip Lunch and Keep Writing? I shouldn't say she wrote it. Her and her 4th grade students wrote this book, and Issy flies her and her kids wherever Issy happens to be. But what I love about Julie is she does not sit in the summer and plan out lesson plans. And you know, Tommy Bias said, you need to know who your kids are first. But what she does is she walks into her room with her kids and she says, okay, guys, here's how to learn it. And her kids just the kids can put up incredibly want to learn the lessons harder than anything Julie would have done for them if she had been the one designing the lesson, and they have buy-in. Got kids of all different levels, and every single one of those kids are able to perform and do because she's allowing them She's awesome. Because really what it's about, again, is empowering students to be masters of their own learning. It's not for us to be there to discover and build that confidence in themselves to know how to do it themselves. Now, we always have big buts. When we talk about flipped classroom, y'all like my little let's talk about the big butts up here in the room. And so there are several big butts that I hear about all the time. One of them is, well, what about standardized testing? And if they're in the classroom doing all these higher order thinking skills, how are they going to pass the standardized test? But study after study after study shows who they consistently score higher and higher and higher on standardized tests because they're not teaching to the level. They're not testing until that test is over. And really teaching to the test, how'd that work out for Atlanta school districts? All my kids don't have devices, or all my kids don't have access to the internet, right? Devices. Well, I think back, I'm a grandma now, and back when I was in school, we didn't have computers at all, and we had encyclopedias. And so if I walked into my teacher's classroom and she had a lesson, and part of that lesson was to go research something on an encyclopedia and use the encyclopedias, I could say, oh, I'm sorry, my family doesn't have a set of encyclopedias at home. Encyclopedias at her house, and we can't do it. If we're taking this, mine would have laughed in my face. I've been like, really? Don't have access. Like, his classroom had devices for them to use. I know that Limestone County has different free internet sites set up around the school, so even if you had to sit in the parking lot of the school, you can still get internet access at night. Or points are. There are ways you can do that. There are libraries. There are ways you can do it. Have your libraries open up early and close late. Have transportation for those kids who need to stay after and get tutorial. And I know other school districts who also send hotspot devices, check out laptops that they can check out just like they would check out a library book or something else, so that there's no excuse for not having those devices. And it's now getting to the point where there's not that many kids that don't have devices, and so just providing those resources for those kids, but not as accepting it as an excuse and just saying, well, we can't have technology because we have this percentage of kids who don't have it at home. Time. Another thing people say, well, I'd like to do this, but I don't have time to do it. Oh my gosh, you have so much more time to do things in a flipped classroom than you do in a regular classroom, because you get those basic learning skills that bore you to all that stuff that's you actually have time for them. And believe me, it doesn't take really a time suck. You have lots of times to catch on to the fact that if I don't come to class ready to start applying what I'm supposed to know, I'm going to stand out like a sore thumb. And you know, kids and peer pressure, they don't like that at all. This one right here, I love it. I don't want to look. Well, guess what? You work with kids. Once they get to what, 5th grade, you look stupid anyway, right? And especially middle school and high school, you already look dumb to them, and it doesn't matter. And one thing we need to say anyway, and why don't we expand to a learning commons, hey, not to where we're all learning together, and if you know something, help me, and let's all do, and then it feels more like a community of learners rather than you are the teacher and they have to sit there passively while you feed them all the information. Say this to me, well, why should I learn this now? You know, 2 years ago we learned such and such, and now we're not even using it, so why should I bother to learn this? Well, tell that to your kids in your classroom. What if a kid in your classroom said that to you? Why do I have to learn this? I'm just going to learn something new 3 weeks from now. Oh, okay. So I didn't really understand that one. What if my parents don't understand? What if my administrators don't understand what I'm doing? Well, I've been around for 23 years, and I've had administrators who don't understand. Matter of fact, I got one of my worst evaluations ever when I was a math teacher. Believe it or not, I was a math teacher. Because I taught the way I never opened up their textbook ever, because even how to do. It was noisy, they were moving around, but I never had a single student make below a C in any of my classes in math, and that's including my self-contained students who were let out to come to my math class because of the way I taught. When he was giving me my terrible evaluation, Miss Robertson, horrible, because he how math class looks. Math class is children at their desk with their books open and the teacher up at the board. Guess what I did when I went back after that evaluation? I kept teaching. My administrator doesn't like the way, because they're not up on what's best for kids, doesn't mean I have to hurt children, and I'm not going to hurt children. And you can explain it to parents. You can have parent nights. I had parents come sit in my classroom because they wanted to see what we were doing. Let them do that. Tweet out, share with social media what you're doing, and get them on board. And if, you know, push comes to shove, I left that school district and went to a school district that got it and knew how to treat kids.
At NATC this year, one of the presenters, your homework is technology.
Yep.
And she loved it that way. That way she didn't have to read anything from the parents, but using that word flipped about have any other parent come using the word flip. That was her first thing she was
first thing is just don't use it.
I
Don't use
know.
the word. Just don't use the word when it comes to parents, the syllabus, nothing.
It has a negative connotation, and that's why I like the rewindable learning better, having that. And then again, just don't even say it. This is just the way we're going to do it. And you know, the kids who I've seen struggle with it the most are your AP and IB students, because they're so used to just having the teacher lecture and tell them exactly what they need to know, and they're real good about memorizing and regurgitating back out. But then you set them loose and say, you've got to use your own creativity to come up with this, they're lost. Isn't that,
Because
isn't that crazy?
that is just, you gotta get in there and just.
Right.
And
And they want it to look like it, and that's not what it is, because you're using each kid's unique abilities in that classroom and letting them shine. So, and then advanced ed, let me tell you, if you're not flipping your classroom, and it, you know, even not using the word flip, but if you're not doing that where it's student-centered, advanced ed audit, if the teacher's the one who's the center of the classroom, you're going to score so horrible on advanced ed. They want to see students actively engaged in the learning, and that the push it has a YouTube and through every single one of these butts plus to deal with an administrator. She does teach 8th grade math, but the different things she talks about can apply. Look back and get some really good solid arguments if you have an admin you have to argue with.
What was her name?
Katie Gimbar, Gimbar. She's really good. I love her. Class. All right, so to you, thanks, Ted, right? So I'm going to take you in to TED Ed and just show you how this looks. And I thought I had that hyperlink. I did. I just didn't press right. So TED Ed, I love it because it shows you a different way of setting up a flipped classroom. Let's see. Which one do we want to look at? How X-rays see through your... That I always needed an example to follow. Or you can tweak ones that already exist. So that with a little video. But along with the video, then it has this think section. And so this is where you have 5 multiple choice and 3 open answer questions, and you can decide how many open answer, multiple choice you want with it. So that's getting in there. But then I like that then it makes you dig deeper. So you can come in here and you can dig deeper, give them additional resources. What's in there too. This would be interesting. And then it takes you on students to do is to collaborate, to discuss, to connect, to bounce ideas off of each other and learn from each other, not just and then go on to the next work. I think this is a perfect layout of how to make a flip. So you can come in here and create your own lessons and then what you do after that and creating that whole lesson. So I really love the way that TED Ed has all this set up. And you can look for different content, grade levels, what grade level what some math teachers and what to be and the difference. I think the fact that instead of just some real video and then doing a worksheet, which you should not ever do, it needs to be interactive. Whatever the video is, you should have the students interacting and doing something deeper with that video. And then what are they going to do when they come in? If y'all aren't familiar with TED, it's wonderful. All things TED are great. Kaizena. Kaizena is a Google add-on. Kaizena, except for my limestone people. The English teachers, I know y'all heard of it already because I already told you about it. Anyone on this side? Kaizena, my through spending all night grading those papers, and spelling corrections and the punctuation and write this and do this, and then they fold the paper and write the F on the outside, or at least that's the grade I always got. And, and so I get that it's already been graded. What the heck was I gonna look at that for? I didn't learn anything from it. Know what I did with that? I threw it in the garbage, never even opened it up. You don't look at that stuff. And what Kaizena does is it allows you to individually, one-on-one conference with every this really cool. And this, I think, will explain Kaizena a bit more. And this is Miss McMunn, one of third grade coach at the school, but the kids absolutely loved using writing as if they're sitting next to you, and you say, okay, I see that in this sentence here you have 3 grammatical errors. Please go back and fix that. So instead of you being the one who fixes the grammatical errors, you're just telling them, in this sentence that I highlighted, there's grammatical errors, go back and fix them. Then the kid has to use their own knowledge to go back and make those corrections. And so let's take a look. Bandwidth.
The children are exposed every week to the writing prompts, basically in the form of comparing the different texts, comparing the different stories, and they're asked to either identify the speaker's point of view or to summarize or something that using the concepts that go along with the stories. And their writing is in need of making a correction and help them, because there's not enough time for me to go from child to child with the in-depth writing, with it a routine, a weekly routine, because it does take so much time. But the one thing that I want to do is show them the correct way. And what I'm doing is spending just massive amounts of time on every paper to try and show them what may be a better sentence or where the errors are, and not to encourage them to become better writers. And the time is just overwhelming. So I'm wondering if there's not another way that I can help them without me being so much the thinker. I want to be more of the facilitator and give them the opportunity to hear what I'm thinking and what I'm suggesting, but let them actually make the corrections themselves and go through that thinking process so they can instill that. Right. And become.
Pretend she's sitting next to you. Pretend you're talking to her. And say what it is you would normally say.
Makes it a folk tale. We said this really doesn't, the time words, but what about, because at the beginning, after the times words, the narrator said, you've probably heard the old folk tale about stone soup. Would that give you a clue that this is probably a folk tale? Like, is she on the right track here, or is she on the right track? I also know it is a folk tale because the Chain brothers were sly characters and tricked their uncle. Right, that hits on it. So let's talk about what makes this a folk tale. What were the things we talked about in class? And I see that you have this, that they were.
Brianna, look back over your writing and see if you remember, or you can bring back the characteristics of a folk tale. You do have, probably heard the old folk tale about stone soup. We did talk about how folk tales are stories or tales that have been passed down by word of mouth. And Tree also have included their uncles, so you're on the right track. Go back to the beginning and see. And it's focusing more on the beginning of a folk tale. Is that phrased? Just read back over and think about the characteristics.
Please go back and just make all of your answers. It will be so much easier for Mrs. Bates to read. Don't be delete all of your message.
It's based on whether teacher they're activating the writing process instead of just turning in a rough draft and getting a grade, which is what happens most of the time, and then there's no writing being learned really. Talking to them. That means a lot to them that the teacher is talking just to them. But it really helps them develop a better mastery of the writing process. And Miss Walker was really the one who used it a bunch over there at Elkmont, and she loved it. She said it cut her grading time on those weekly writing prompts in half, if not more. And I saw over time her kids' writing really improve with what they were doing because they were able to see what their mistakes were. They were the ones who were going back and making the corrections, and they were the ones who were doing the learning instead of her. And so it was easy. And the nice thing too is on that Kaizen, the kids can actually press the little microphone and respond back to their teacher as well. And so that's something you can do. You can also add links in on there. So if you have like a video that can help them learn how to use that comma correctly or how to do something else correctly, you can attach that learning right there in with it. So if you're still having trouble with learning how to do blah, 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 click on this link so that you can go and learn that.
So each child has to set up a Google Docs account.
We are Google Apps for Education. We have Google Apps for Education, so they have that already. Now, if you're not Google Apps for Education, you need to be because it's fantastic. Blend Space is another thing that you could use to flip your classroom, and I think this is our last thing. I'm just going to show you an example of Blend Space, but if you don't know about it, you need to go back and learn about it. Miss Lakefold was our culinary arts teacher at Auburn High School, and she was out on maternity leave the last 6 weeks of school when she did her big culminating activity. And so what she did is week by week, she did a blend space for each, depending on what week it was, would go through, and she has all their directions for you. And then posted through while she was at home, because it's blend space, she could still see what they were doing in real time, respond to them, the teacher, and they can add a comment in here and can talk to her and comment, and she could see those comments in real time and respond. If they even build quizzes in on the blend space itself, that will grade itself, and it's just a great all-around tool for flipping the classroom. At Auburn, we used Moodle. One times to get one link up in the thing. I like it again. If you Moodle through thing in your blend space, you've got one link for the blend space. Upload that one link to your learning management system. Then if you make any changes to any of the blocks in your blend space, you don't have to change that link ever had to change the link. You can change every single block on your blend space. You never had to change the link. Because it tastes like that's so great. For a health condition, a lot of times realize how awesome leave or something, and then they're like, I need some. My class can still communicate with them, and that's in California. It's amazing. And this is her math class here, and she has all different types of kids, just like Julie Ramsey does. It's not a gifted class. They don't have a bunch of technology. You'll notice when you go through all of this that most of the time they're using those little dry erase boards, those little personal dry erase boards. So you encourage you to go website. I'm going to work through this and asked her for help, and I've also contacted Trey as well, and they're all very, and she lets you borrow and copy and use anything you want. All right, here we go. She organizes all her stuff online, which is very important to have. She uses Sophia, but look at this, her guided notes. So she has those amazing guided notes there. Now slow down. Then she has the student success packets. And I think are
which functions. We called them fences.
And so she goes through those little things and gives them the student success packets. And here, I thought this was really great. Her video tips, the length, 1 to 1.5 minutes per grade level. And then you're going to teach and model for the student. She has the BFIT and check your tech. And she has all these other but look how organized she is. Watch, summarize, and question. And then she goes around and asks secret questions. It's called Whisk. And she goes through and has all these different things. Her Whisk charts. Look how involved that is, her Whisk charts. You really need to take a close look at that. She's so organized.
They are the fences on our graph
Oops.
that break our graph.
And that video finally started. It turns into, from the Whisk, it goes into student grids are through, and she has them practicing and applying what they're learning, flexible peer groups, so that as one student gets it, they can move to a different group. Moving peer groups based on ability in the classroom and being innovative. There's a layout of kind of that, so that there's a lot of paper organized when she flips her classroom. And it's so much not videos. So I would definitely take a closer look at Crystal Kirsch and what she's doing in her classroom. But remember, try it one bite at a time. Don't try to flip your entire semester or your entire year for every single class. I say flip one lesson with one. There's always going to be clients. Try and sometime you do working with you guys over at Madison City.